Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel O'Boyle. I'm news editor at IGB, and I'll be chairing today's IGB webinar. We're delighted to be hosting a webinar with TrueLayer today, discussing transforming your payment strategy with open banking. With new technologies emerging and regulators in Europe tightening rules around iGaming payment verification, source of funds, and affordability, many operators are reassessing their payment strategy. All the while, brands must protect the player experience. And new research from YouGov and TrueLayer shows payments are key to this. Whether a player is choosing a new provider or allocating deposits, payments play a key role in driving their decisions. Open banking presents an opportunity for payment leaders to differentiate and drive customer loyalty while meeting old and new regulatory requirements, particularly as strong customer authentication threatens to further complicate the payments experience in 2021. This webinar is the first of a series of webinars this week on the topic of future technology in iGaming. Keep your eye out for exciting news in the coming weeks expanding upon this. Our panel today consists of our moderator, Max Emilsson, Chief Revenue Officer at TrueLayer, Wallach Eck, Product Manager at TrueLayer, Christian Reinheimer, Head of Payment Strategy at LeoVegas, and Mikhail Marceau, Head of Payments at the Kindred Group. They'll have an opportunity to fully introduce themselves shortly. There'll be a Q&A session following the presentation, so please feel free to submit questions as we go along, and we'll try to address as many of them as possible within the allocated time. And with that, I'm going to pass over to Max. Go ahead, Max.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session, where we're going to talk about what iGaming customers are looking for when it comes to a payments experience, and how open banking can help to cater to these needs. Very exciting. My name is Max Emilsson, and I am the Chief Revenue Officer at TrueLayer. And with me today, I have assembled the absolute smartest and sharpest minds possible to debate payments and open banking in iGaming. I have with me my good friend Christian Reinheimer, Head of Payment Strategy of LeoVegas. A new acquaintance to me, Mikhail Marceau, Group Head of Payments at Kindred, and from TrueLayer, I have my colleague Wool, who is a PM here at TrueLayer. So today, we're going to kick off with a short presentation on our vision for a new generation of player payments in iGaming powered by open banking, and we'll look into what that means for operators. We're then going to look at how open banking payments actually work and show a demo of them in action. We'll be speaking in depth to Christian from LeoVegas about his experience of implementing open banking, the rollouts and its results. And we're going to move on to a broader panel discussion about the future of iGaming payments and open banking in Europe. Finally, we'll leave time for an audience Q&A at the end. So let's kick it off. So what's the problem with player payments today? It depends a little bit on what payments method you're using, but all operators will feel more or less these 5 pains. For card payments and wallets, it's failure rates, frauds, high fees, and potentially slow settlement. For manual bank transfer, the UX can be bad, the conversion can be bad, and the reconciliation usually is an operational nightmare. For most part, these payment methods are not designed for online, and it shows. It costs operators and it frustrates their players. More specifically, I want to share with you some research that TrueLayer carried out with YouGov last year, looking at key issues around slow payments and slow onboarding. In this research, 3,000 players across Europe gave their view on payments. More than half, 55%, were likely to switch to a different iGaming brand if that brand offered them instant payouts. Plus a third, 28%, would considering depositing more if they could withdraw their winnings instantly. But as you know, instant payouts aren't a reality for most payment methods. Cards can take 1 to 3 days for pay-ins and up to 5 for payouts. Manual bank transfers are usually same day for pay-in, but can take up to 3 days for payouts. Digital wallets and online transfers offer instant pay-in, but payouts can take up to 1 day. Our next finding was that approximately 2/3 of all players will not tolerate a sign-up process longer than 5 minutes. As account verification and anti-money laundering checks will be an important part of any onboarding flow, finding an automated, fast, and secure way to onboard players is crucial. And finally, from me, and I don't need to tell you this, I'm sure, but fraud losses on card payments are hurting operators, hitting approximately 1.5 billion euros in 2020. Fraud losses, of course, are typically caused by fraudulent card chargebacks and insecure credential sharing or password storage. Strong Customer Authentication this year is looking to make cards safer, but is likely going to have a negative impact on conversion for operators. So any payment method for iGaming need to be at least these 5 things. Instant, and when we talk about instant payments here, we're talking about the whole payment cycle, both in and out, both high converting and low fraud, and one shouldn't have to be at the expense of the other. Cost effective in rates, but also in keeping conversion rates high and fraud low. And they shouldn't be introducing unfamiliar brand names to your customers that may create uncertainty for your players and hurt conversion. The truth is, of course, that too often payments don't look like this. The good news is that open banking can help you achieve most of these things. And now we're going to explain how. Wool, are you still with me?
I am indeed. Thank you, Max. So hello, everyone. I am Wol, a product manager for payments at TrueLayer. And today I'll talk to you about how open banking payments actually work, along with how they can actually be combined with other payment rails to provide a complete solution for iGaming operators. So let's dig into it. Fundamentally, open banking lets you connect directly to a player's bank account via open APIs. This can be to take a payment, to verify an account, or to consume data to understand affordability. There are many, many use cases. With open banking payments specifically, this means that funds are transferred directly from one bank account to another. And unlike with screen scraping and credential sharing, this is done by secure, regulated APIs. With open banking payments, the player's funds are taken from their bank account after one authorization and sent through to your bank account. At no point are you waiting with a merchant account in the middle. At no point are you waiting because you haven't paid as much to get instant settlement options. The money goes straight to your bank account at the fastest speed we can possibly do it at. In the UK, this is through faster payments. In Europe, this is SEPA Instant or SEPA Credit. So this provides some really important benefits for operators in UK and Europe. The best journeys are on mobile, so we optimize our payment service for mobile, regardless of whether you start on desktop, so that we get the user on their mobile and they can continue their journey back on their desktop when they're done authenticating. And this is taking advantage of things like app to app, which is a really smooth user experience. What's really important is that we're also getting them through a biometric authentication method, which is intuitive and practically eliminates the possibilities of chargebacks. This leads to a more secure and safe experience for players, and most will be familiar with this process. It's in their bank app that they've already installed and they already use daily to check funds. For operators, it means less fraud, and you are automatically meeting SEA requirements without having to implement clunky workarounds. And in bank-to-bank payments also typically have higher conversion rates than cards. We typically see a 20% increase in conversion compared to cards overall. And when it comes to payment success, rates higher than 95%. And finally, payments settle instantly, where we can use instant payment rails like faster payments and like SEPA Instant. So this is all great, but open banking has one main drawback. It's a one-way rail and you can't use it to pay out. And this becomes really important because your players deposit funds, but would like to sometime be able to withdraw funds as well. And this is why TrueLayer have combined open banking with instant payment schemes like SEPA Instant and faster payments, which are normally only automated by banks or backdoor hacks like screen scraping. And what we've done is we're bringing them to any operator. So regardless of your regulatory status, you can take the payment by open banking. leveraging your player's bank to receive instant payment directly into your bank account with no middleman. You can verify account ownership of the person playing. And when the user comes to withdraw, you can get unlimited instant withdrawals regardless of the original top-up fee. And what this means is we're creating a closed loop so that you are AML compliant. So all in all, this is an end-to-end funding solution entirely within your own brand. And how this looks in implementation is almost entirely down to you, although we do work with our customers to give guidance and advice on the flow in order to do things like increase conversion. So let's move on to an example of what this actually looks like in real life. I'd now like to introduce to you Christian Reinheimer, Head of Payment Strategy at LeoVegas. So LeoVegas was the first iGaming operator to launch open banking payments in November last year. Christian, are you there?
I am indeed.
Amazing. Welcome aboard. So Christian, can you tell me, why did you decide to launch open banking payments for your players?
To answer that question, I have to take a bit of a long shot, because we didn't come up with this in the course of a couple of weeks, but basically identified open banking as such as a technology innovation topic that we started to look into quite a long time ago. So we started our investigations already late in 2019 when it wasn't even rolled out. And over the course of a couple of weeks, we tried to wrap our minds around what is possible, what is not possible, what is the constraints, how does the use cases look like? And then we decided that ultimately this is a strategic topic for us to follow in the iGaming space. So we then embarked on a journey to find the right partner to implement this with, talk to quite a couple of the players in the space, and as we all know, ended up with you guys to build what we have now launched end of last year. As you say, first time in and out. I think there were some operators that did only pay-ins on open banking before us, but I think we were the first one that launched the full journey in and out. So yeah, we still see this as a strategic innovation topic for us, not only because of all the good things that you have already mentioned that this brings for the player, the safety, the at least to large extent instant payments, but from a payment strategy perspective as well.
Thanks, Christian. Really interesting to hear your journey, and again, well done for being first movers in this space. So we have a couple of short demo videos here where we're actually showing your flow. Could you talk us through them?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe if I can ask you that, because I think things go quite quickly here, to pause them every now and then. Oh, now we already, if you can go back a bit. As a bit of a disclaimer, I think things are going quite quickly in this journey, which is a good thing, but it's not a good thing if you want to explain what's happening. So let's pause here and there. Now, what you see here, that's obviously a loading screen of our cashier. If you can let it run for just a second or something like that. Right, so yes, can you please stop? So this is basically what we present to the customer. We point out a couple of the positive aspects of this payment method. So currently, as we see, we are trying to promote the payment method a bit so people will actually pick it up. Then, as you can see, we're not running it under a TrueLayer brand, but we are running it under a generic instant bank transfer brand to see how that picks up. And if you can just, yeah, just a little bit. Oh, yeah, if you can just go to the next screen. Ah, yeah, that's all right. And now what you see here is basically the customer chooses the bank. This happens on our premise, so we don't have to move the customer to a pop-up or iframe or something like that. So we can basically show them the bank selector in our trusted environment. Customer then sees all the banks available, and then obviously have to pick their bank. If you can let it run just a couple of seconds, right? And now, of course, when the customer has chosen their bank, something happens that is out of our control, and that is that the customer has to sign off the transaction, which is part of the Strong Customer Authentication as of PSD2. So whatever bank you go with, that will be handled according to their process. So in this very example, we see that there's a banking app being launched where you have to sign off the transaction. As you can see here, it's being authenticated with the Face ID. If you can, yep, thank you. So basically you have to confirm that you want to do this. And when you have confirmed, that's pretty much it. So long story short, this takes a couple of seconds, and of course the sign off is a bit of a hurdle if you want, but it's for the sake of customer safety and making sure that their bank account is not abused by anyone to abuse their funds. So I think it's a hurdle worth taking, and I think it's also in the light of 3DS2, where we now see the same thing happening with card payments, not in the UK, that's later this year, but in all the other European markets, is also basically the same process that you have compared with other payments there.
Okay. Could we maybe, just before we move on to payout, do a full run through of the pay-in video, just so we can see how long the flow takes with our commentary? Thanks. Beautiful.
Just Christian, just one small question. Is that for first depositor?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. And then for returning user, is the user kind of payment flow tokenized? So when the user comes for second deposit, is it faster than that or as fast?
I think we will tokenize, and that you can also see in the payout journey that we have as a upcoming video, which is of course slightly different, but the sign off you have to do, right? I mean, you have to sign off the transaction. That is, yeah. But you don't have to do that on the withdrawal part, obviously.
Okay.
Shall we have a look at that video?
Cool. Yeah, Christian, if you could walk us through this, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, this would be even harder to explain because it's even quicker. So basically, when we have tokenized, you basically just choose the amount that you want to pay out. You push the button, you say, yes, I want to do this, and then that's it. And I think what's the even more interesting part of that journey is what Max and Vol have mentioned earlier, is that the money, by the time you have clicked yes and this transaction is confirmed, will end up in your bank account if it's going, for example, via faster rail, in less than a minute. So we can really talk about something that is almost instant.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. I think it's really clear that the experience is much better than what is currently available. So maybe if I could ask just a couple more questions to you, Christian, about your experience so far. So maybe we could start with, tell us about what early results you've seen so far.
Sure. I think you will understand that I obviously cannot give you any hard facts and numbers and details on that, but to keep it a bit high level, we've seen very good pickup. So obviously everything that is new takes a bit of time to be to getting some user adoption. The adoption that we see now is pretty good. So the open banking solution that we have has taken quite some significant parts of the share of our newly deposited customers coming in. What we are even more happy about is that we see that the people that have chosen the open banking solution for their first deposit do come back. So the people that come back and use it, not only come back frequently and use it, but they also show higher average amounts than, for example, what you see on cards or on PayPal. So I would say so far we are pretty happy with what we have seen with the pickup, but we are also keen to try out a couple of things to see how we can steer customer behavior there by the means of communication in several channels on site, but also picking up customers via email sendouts, informing them about the availability of this, and see what does that do to the population that we have that previously used cards and previously used paper? So it's quite interesting times.
Yeah, thanks. That's super interesting. Definitely a really good early sign that returning customers are more likely to choose this payment method, and also are more likely to deposit more, which really shows that they're beginning to trust this new method. So you kind of touched upon my next question in your last answer, but it would be, what are you doing to encourage players to choose this payment option going forward?
Right. So I think this is something that you have to experiment a bit with. Now, we have launched this product in UK, which is not necessarily a traditional banking market. So we're looking at the customer base that is not very used to this, which requires us to try out a couple of things. What we will do is play around with the presentation of the payment option in the cache and try out multiple versions of it to see which one picks up best. Then obviously we want to activate our existing customer base and see if we can draw some of the people that are currently using cards or that are currently using wallets over to this solution. I think when you do that, you need to come up with a good narrative that basically, picks up the customer with their needs and explains why they should do this according to their specific needs. So these are the things that we will be trying out.
Thanks. It will definitely be interesting to hear about your learnings and see how you do going down those paths. I guess penultimate question is, how has conversion been, and how does this compare to your other payment methods?
I think this is a tough one because every time you talk about rates, when you talk about conversion rates, acceptance rates, most of the times you do not compare apples with apples. So that makes things a bit tougher, right? Now, in the early days, of course, the success rate of this method was lower than it is today because it was brand new. So people that try out stuff that they don't know just for the sake trying it out and not really intending to use it, but just browse their way around, then have a negative impact on your rates, even though that's not customers really intending to use the method. Now, with a couple of weeks past, I think we have left that bias behind us and can really look at the numbers a bit more for real. The conversion, when you have people that know what they're doing, the conversion is actually quite good. And then again, it depends a bit where you start measuring, where you stop measuring. So everything where we actually send the customer to their actual bank to do the payment, there the conversion is fantastic. Then of course you have some people that just browse around and have a bit of a negative impact on your rates.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think you did a good job of illustrating the complexities and trying to make sense of conversion rates and compare the various different methods. So finally, are there any lessons that you've learned in implementation that you'd like to share with others who are looking to introduce OB payments?
Yeah, sure. I think what you have to be a bit careful with is that open banking is not the out-of-the-box savior for all headaches that you have. So you need to know what you are trying to solve with it. And that requires that you spend a bit of time with the subject matter to understand what is possible and what is not possible, which is very different if you look at the different markets. So let's not forget, banking is a very local thing. It's not yet as international like, for example, card payments in the way it works. So each market has its own characters, if you want. On each market, for example, the availability of high quality open banking APIs is different. On each market, the availability and adoption of the banks of instant payment schemes is different. You also need to be aware of the whole journey, and that the actual open banking APIs, the PSD2 APIs, were never designed for payouts. They were only designed for the deposit part of the journey. So I think my advice would be, long story short, to really spend some time to familiarize yourself with what's possible, what's not possible. Have a good idea of what markets you want to use this on, because markets are different. And yeah, get yourself a partner that you trust that can tackle the challenges of this dynamic journey together with you.
Thanks, Christian. I'm sure everybody found your insights really useful. So now I'm going to hand over to Max for our panel discussion. Max, are you there?
Yes, I am, Wool. Thank you very much. So to quickly introduce our panel, we heard a lot from Christian here today on your views, but can you give us a very short version, you know, a little bit of background on yourself, Christian?
Of course, sure. I'm with Leo Vegas as head of payment strategy for roughly 1.5 years now. Previously, I've spent quite a lot of time on what I call the other side of the table with payment providers. So I've been with Swedish payment unicorn Klarna for almost 7 years. Share a bit of history with you there, Max. And now looking at the payment space from a operator/merchant perspective.
Very cool. Thank you so much. And of course, also today we have Mikael from Kindred. Can you give us a quick?
Of course. Hi, everyone. First, thanks, Christian, for the very good insight and answers, etc. I think what you said made definitely a lot of sense, and it resonated in me. So I'm Michael Marceau. I've been in the gambling industry only on the operator side for 14 years now. Started at Unibet Group in 2007, moved to other venture, and I came back to Unibet now / Kindred Group in 2014, and I have been running payment for the group for the past 5 years, together with awesome teams based in Serbia, Sweden, Malta, and UK and Gibraltar.
Very cool. I really appreciate you fellas taking the time today in your very busy schedule. Let's kick it off. Okay, so let's talk about the readiness of open banking infrastructure across Europe, which Christian alluded to a little bit before. Wool, can you tell us how realistic is it for operators to use open banking now in 2021? And what does the future situation look like?
Cool, that's a great question. So I would say, first of all, European readiness definitely lags behind the UK. The UK has had a head start with lots of volume now being pushed through. And this has given UK banks the opportunity to improve reliability based on feedback from companies like TrueLayer. That being said, readiness within Europe actually varies greatly from country to country, market to market. This is partly because different countries have different implementations of the open banking standard. So for example, we have Access2A in Germany and STEP in France. The approach we take is prioritizing the countries that are the most ready, for example, Germany, and then giving lots of feedback to banks in order to help them eliminate issues and improve reliability. And we'll continue in this fashion, and we expect the struggling countries to catch up over time. It's likely that there will be a large lag time between the most ready and least ready countries. So we would advise operators to use open banking in the countries where you can offer a great service to your players instead of waiting for every European country to be ready. So to kind of tie back to Christian's answer from earlier, it really does vary from market to market. Some are ready in 2021 and some will take a bit longer. So really take the time to assess, make sure you have a good partner who is able to advise you on where to enter.
Max, can I ask a question to Wool? Is that okay?
Certainly. The floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you so much. I have a question about the market readiness. Why do you think certain countries that are quite elaborated when it comes to payment are delaying this open banking API, for instance? I'm thinking, you know, Netherlands, Sweden, Finland, for instance.
So I think every market is unique, and I definitely can't speak to the individual circumstances in Finland or in Sweden. I guess my answer would just be that it's quite complex. You have completely different implementations, you have different timelines, and in a way, I think probably a factor is the culture in a country and the way that they use banking. So there may be more or less pressure in certain countries than others, which leads to completely different levels of quality and experience. So a bit of a generic answer. It's difficult for me to tell you exactly what the situation is.
I can help a little bit on that. I think is like UK had a financial crisis in 2008, which made the financial regulator very strong, which meant that when they implemented open banking, which was ahead of the rest of Europe, they got the banks to implement a really good solution. And the financial regulator in each European market acts differently. They have different levels of power. Like Wool is saying, the banking culture is different between different countries. I don't know if you are French, but the French banking market is very different compared to other markets in Europe. So
if you tell me, Max, that I'm not French, then we have a problem. Huh? Otherwise, I fake my accent probably, but no, I get you. I get you. Okay.
Yeah, and the other point I would say is this: it's a vicious cycle where the better flow, the more users, the more push on the banks, the more push on the banks, the better the flow, the more users, etc. And we've got this now working in the UK extremely well. Germany comes from bank transfer as a payment method is one of the most used payment methods in Germany. So this push somewhat already exists in the German market, in the Dutch market, where Ideal is a dominating payment method. As again, picking on the French, bank transfer as a payment method is not as prevalent as it is in other markets. So it's all of these local issues because we're EU and it's a mosaic. What we can tell you is that it's not 10 years away. It's like, is France conversion rate good enough in 12 months or in 9 months or in 6 months? Where we can see now that like Nordics, Netherlands, Germany, Austria, Ireland are now reaching a level which is definitely good enough for prime time.
Cool. Thanks, Max. Good stuff.
Very good. I appreciate the question. It's a very relevant question. Let's move on and talk about regulation and the impact it has on payments, especially within iGaming. So the new responsible gambling regulation, which is being rolled out locally, which is probably not too easy on you fellas, that it's this mosaic, the same pain that we feel with open banking, but in gambling regulation, like in the UK. Can you talk a little bit, Christian, to start with? What effects does this gambling regulation have on payments? How do they sort of affect each other?
Right. I guess to start with, the challenge that we are facing is that more and more markets in Europe come up with local regulations. Then, of course, because that's also a mosaic, they're not having the exact same requirements as existing markets that are locally licensed. So every time a market decides to come up with a local regulatory set of requirements, these will look slightly different than what we already know. And I think one of the big challenges that we have in the iGaming industry is that the more, for example, in Europe, the more European markets are locally licensed, the bigger the variety of different requirements we're looking at. And that also requires us to come up with more and more complex systems that are capable of dealing with things differently in UK compared to Sweden, compared to now coming up Germany, or later this year the Netherlands. So I think one of the challenges that we have is that the landscape of requirements that we're looking at is getting more and more complex. On the one hand, because there's more regulatory bodies coming into the field of play that come with slightly or sometimes completely new requirements, and of course the existing ones also every now and then update their requirements. So there's this constant influx of requirements or change requirements, where we then have to assess, okay, are we already compliant? Do we have to change something? What do we have to change if we have to change something, and make sure that this is part of our product roadmap. So I think one of the main challenges here is that the complexity is increasing quite rapidly.
Yes, I understand. I mean, it makes gambling, iGaming, a bit of a unique industry in that sense, where yep. I guess the other side of the table, which you and I have been on, Christian, which is on the fintech side, you can at least passport. Like, it's super complex, but you nailed it in Germany, you can passport it. Like, iGaming seems unbelievably much more complex. Mikael, can you tell us a little bit about your experience on this question as well, please?
Yeah, I mean, the question I'm seeing, there is two sides of the question. I think one is around problem gambler and the latest regulation. Kindred Group just published something extremely interesting. I think yesterday or this morning, sharing exactly our share of revenue coming from problem gambler and our aim and what we want to achieve over the next few years. I don't speak on behalf of Christian, but I'm pretty sure that Leo Vegas is on the same side, of the coin. The challenge is that you have like the Wild West operator versus the established operator. And the strategies are slightly different. I mean, in UK or in other country, we remove credit card, for instance, option a couple of months or years ago. It didn't have a massive impact because we're already extremely strict when it comes to credit, betting on credit, etc. And that's not something that we pushed in the past. So, removing that completely allowed us to have a nice and clean sheet, so player can at least spend the money that they have. Now the challenge is about the money that you have. Can you afford spending it on gambling? And yeah, we have our internal system which is extremely well developed. However, using, for instance, open banking to check on source of fund, on affordability, this extra third-party check or API call would definitely help us to become better. So this is one side. The other side, and I make it short, is around regulation and payment option. Pre-regulation, we couldn't have access to, for instance, Swish payment in Sweden. After regulation, we could have access to that. Pre-regulation, we cannot have access to ideal payment in Netherlands. After regulation, we should have access to that. So regulation means also allowing us to operator to have access to local payment method that are safe and players are trusting those payment methods.
So you, Mikael, are sort of saying that net positive to regulation, that a lot of the changes being implemented you might have made either way because you care about your players, and the regulation itself makes you more legit maybe in certain, for instance, payment provider, but even other suppliers, what do I know, eyes. So it gives you access to a level playing field with other industries essentially, or maybe the national, sort of the local national operators.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, fascinating. Thank you. That's really good answers. Looking out in Europe, Mikael, can you speak a little bit on how regulation sort of is changing the payment landscape? You sort of brushed on it with Swish and Ideal for that matter. Do you have any other examples to talk about there, or?
Yes, I could speak about the non-regulation and how the non-regulation in certain countries are giving Christian and I some headache, or at least on my side. But no, about regulation. Yeah, I think Swish is a fascinating example that you being Swedish, Max, I think you could also maybe, or I hope so, relate to that. But new payment method, and maybe that's why in Sweden there is a bit of a delay in open banking. That was more my original question to Vol at the beginning. But I think Swish, for instance, is completely fascinating. After regulation, access to Swish. Swish was launched years ago and is today being used by 92%, as far as I know, of the Swedish population. So definitely, having access after regulation to such a payment method, which is smooth, good user experience, basically what you guys are trying also to replicate on a European scale. So exactly. That's key.
I think just comment on Sweden is that we have 4 or 5 very big banks who try to not compete with one another, and they're quite effective at that, as opposed to UK, where you have Revolut Monzo, etc., really stirring up the pot, which I think then also has a effect on the open banking APIs in Sweden. And remember, Swish is owned by the big banks.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting oligopoly going on in Sweden. But Revolut is coming here, so who knows what it will look like in the future. So moving on then to Christian, what's your perspective on this regulation and the payments landscape out in Europe?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, the regulation changes. There's more markets locally regulating, and that will have a huge impact. It will have a huge impact from a perspective that Mikael has already set forth with regards to what's available. It will have an impact on with regards to how many people do the same thing if it's available, and what that does to commercial conversations that we have with providers, which is always interesting. Then new requirements with regards to keeping players safe will then also open up the field for new providers that will wrap their minds around how you can solve this in the best possible way. So there's a bit of a dynamic there, which is also great because you see innovation in that space.
Interesting. You mentioned before strong customer authentication coming to Europe and in UK a little bit later this year. Like, what, if any, impact does this implementation have on your payment strategy, starting with Christian?
Good question. So I think to some extent you have to kind of reevaluate card payments, because previously there was on the one hand you had a user flow with potentially less steps. On the other hand, you had potentially more fraudulent or potentially fraudulent transactions because they were not signed off. So when it comes to trying to provide a customer a very quick experience, then so far payments were, from a customer experience, much quicker than cards or maybe other payment methods. Now that will change, but on the other hand, also the aspect of fraud and chargebacks will change dramatically with more 3DS 2 signed off transactions coming up. So I think you have to kind of reevaluate what card payments mean to your payment mix from a customer and UX perspective when it comes to the speed factor, especially when you want to onboard new customers. You would love to have a quick checkout flow so people can complete it quickly and not dropping off. But on the other hand, it also is a bit of a different perspective when it comes to what does it mean to risk that we are exposed to with regards to payments.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, go ahead, Mikael. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I wanted to make it quite smooth and carry on after Christian. Sorry. No, I think it's also, I mean, 3D Secure was there, and I think to a certain extent, we as operator and together with our partner maybe managed to educate our player, more and more over the past 5, 6, 7 years. If you would have shown a 3DS Windows back in whatever 2015 to all the player, it would have been a bit of a nightmare, like what's that, etc. Plus, it was not at all optimized on the mobile, so it used anyway disaster. So I think we managed to do that. Together with the card scheme, although we don't have a direct relationship with them. But now with a CA for card payment, I think it's also the beginning. It's the beginning because now, throughout 2021, 2022 and further, we'll be able to use much more maybe exemption tools to process the payment. So I think it's the beginning of SCA. And to be completely honest and transparent, we haven't seen any big negative impact on the card processing since whatever past few weeks or past few weeks. The challenge is that some third-party providers are not ready, so we need to play around with the volume to ensure that we are processing through the correct partner.
But do you see a positive effect on the fraud, or negative, whatever the good one is?
The fraud, it's a bit early because you have 100 whatever 20 days to initiate a chargeback. So definitely early. If you invite me to the next webinar in 100 maybe or in 90 days now, maybe I'll be able to share. But we didn't really. It depends the way you set up. We're set up in a way that with or without SCA, our fraud ratio and level is pretty low. Obviously, processing volume is pretty high. So even if it's you're speaking about 0.2, 0.1, 0.15%, it still represents quite a lot of money.
Very good. We might take you up on the offer depending on how it goes here before we close, Mikael.
Cool.
Thank you very much. Really insightful answer. Thank you. Moving on, let's talk about customer preferences for payment methods across the UK and Europe. So we have brushed upon Ideal and Swish and all of this good stuff. So what new trends are you seeing? What changes are you seeing in UK and Europe? Again, starting with Christian.
Right. So, I mean, first off, if you look at Swish as an example, I think it's a very good example that can show how payment innovation, when new things come into a market that customers love, can change the picture quite dramatically. Then most of the times you can't really foresee these coming, like forecasting what's going to be hot in 1 or 2 years. I think what we see or what we will be facing is that the frequency of things coming in newly will increase, because we're talking about more vehicles that can be used to build solutions, which is interesting. The fintech industry is expanding. At the end of the day, there's only so many ways of doing a payment online. You have to build on the card schemes, you have to build on the banking schemes, or you're at the end of the day trying to build something e-money wise, but then you still need to get money into e-money lanes. I think what will be more interesting is what we will see coming out of the cryptocurrency space. I think there's going to be quite some interesting concepts that come our way that will be interesting for our industry, but also other industries. I mean, now what we see, what everybody's talking about is crypto as a means for high risk investment, and not so much a means for actual making payments. I think that's still something that is more marginal. But with people being more accustomed to it while dealing with it as a means for investment, I think it also will open up doors for more use cases as means for payment.
Is Tesla car a high-risk investment, Christian?
Well, they should have done that transaction 4 weeks ago. They would have made a lot of money.
I'm waiting for Bezos maybe to say that Ripple can be accepted, and then then I'll be good. Anyway.
No, we're very good. I mean, I think that's exactly the thing, right? I mean, I'm not sure if all of you are aware, but Tesla has basically bought 1 or 2 Bitcoins just recently, and are building on the concept as well. And I think it's, as we see these concepts reaching into parts of our life that we are more accustomed with, like driving a car, and previously crypto being more used in, let's say, niche parts of commerce. That's exactly what I mean. I mean, exactly these kind of moves will bring with them more innovation in the day-to-day payment space. So thanks, Mikael, for bringing that one up. That was a very good one.
Mikael, the same question to you, I guess. What are you thinking similarly to Christian? Are you seeing some other trends?
Yeah, I mean, Apple Pay is, we started rolling out Apple Pay per market a couple of years ago, I think July 2019, if my memory is good, and yeah, it has increased drastically, and I think it goes back to the user journey. It goes back to safe deposit option, and Apple Pay has been growing quite rapidly. I think the adoption rate is super high, especially on certain markets. Now, speaking about the UK, I mean, speaking about Sweden, for instance, where customer preferences are very diverse, 40% Swish, 20% Trustly, 30% card, a bit of e-wallet and a bit of e-wallet there. UK definitely card driven, but I think this open banking is giving a bit of a boost to the card scheme, and we're shaking up, or you are, not me, you're shaking up the trees there, and I think that's what the payment sphere or industry needed, and I think it's happening. Customer preferences, well, yeah, it's all in your hand, to boost awareness, for instance, of open banking. We need awareness. Clients need awareness. And I think not really us operator. I think mainly the client.
Yes, it is definitely she that decides. Let me thank you for that. Let me jump to the last question before we jump into Q&A. Instant payments, and are they really instant, and is it a good thing? We'll sort of start for you. Are payments actually instant? What does that mean?
Sure. So in the UK, the answer is really simple. Yes, they are instant. We use faster payment rails, meaning both payments in and payments out typically settle under 5 seconds, which in the world of payments basically is instant. In Europe, things get slightly more complicated. So you have a combination of SEPA Instant, which is generally under 10 seconds, average under 5, and SEPA Credit, which settles a few times a day on business days. And there are countries like Germany and Spain with quite high SEPA Instant coverage. And on the other hand, countries like Ireland with almost no support. And even there are some nuances where both the sending and receiving bank needs to be connected to SEPA Instant for it to actually be instant. However, we expect to see coverage increase as more and more banks connect to these faster rails. I think also when you talk about Europe and you talk about instant, it's useful to distinguish between payments in and payments out. So even if payments aren't immediately settling in, so even if payments in aren't immediately settling, you can often allow players to actually play as soon as you have confirmation that the payment has been executed. And because of open banking, the chances of a player initiating a chargeback are practically eliminated. It's very difficult to do so within the UK. With payout, which basically means you're kind of reducing the risk of fronting the money. With payouts, however, players can't reuse their money until funds settle into their account, which means instant payouts are only possible in the UK and in places where high SEPA Instant coverage exists. So we use the fastest possible rails by default and then fall back to slower rails if necessary. So short answer, UK, yes, instant. Europe, more nuanced, depends on the country. That would be my answer.
Very cool. Mikael, Christian, do you have anything to add here?
Instant payout, it's definitely a Kindred strategy past few years, when some competitor or whatever were, not deliberately delaying the payment. I'm not saying that, but probably making some checks in the background. We were trying as much as we can to automate, the process of verifying, the winnings and paying out our customer instantly. I think it's key. Now, we tried 2-3 years ago in UK with like 6 batch per day, where customer would get the money, after a couple of hours, not instant. Now, as Vol was saying, it is indeed instant. Some other country or other payment mechanism are also doing instant payout. I mean, Visa Direct started. Not all the banks are obviously. Not all the issuing banks, are on that Visa Direct mechanism, but it's working well. And for me, instant payout, I always said it. That's the key for instant gratification. You get your money, you get the money back in your account. You go to a pub. I mean, at the moment, you can't really go to a pub, especially in the UK. But maybe you go to Malta and then enjoy your beer directly with your winnings. That's what gaming is about,
Very cool. Christian, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, Mikael has made all the important points here, right? I mean, at the end of the day, why you come to a place like the ones that we are working for as a customer is because you're hoping to win, right? And you have had the numbers in the beginning of this session where you also had clear evidence based on the survey that you have conducted that there is a driver for people to come back to an operator if they can access their winnings quickly. I mean, it doesn't matter if you go out for a beer or if you're maybe now buy some stuff on Amazon while you're logged in, but if you can have that money available for whatever you desire to be spending it for, if that happens instantly, then that's a strong argument for a customer to be on your platform. So of course that is something that we're striving for at all times. Now, I think Michael has also pointed into a very interesting point here, right? There is instant and instant. So one thing is how quickly you as an operator can actually approve the withdrawal and send it to wherever you do the payout. So that is important to streamline your internal processes and your and to automate as much as you can, so you don't have delays and have the customer waiting for no reason. But then once the transaction leaves your premise, technically, the question is what type of payment method can process it instantly. And if you can then have something like, for example, Swish in Sweden, which is almost instant as well, then of course that drives customer adoption like crazy. And that also ties into what we earlier mentioned. The payment innovation will be driven by what's the most convenient for the customer.
Very good. Thank you very much. I think we have time for one final question. I think I'm gonna hurl it to Wool, actually. Can you speak about how open banking solution can help operators protect their customers from harmful gambling?
Sure thing. So the data side of open banking opens up some really interesting opportunities. I think when you talk about protecting customers from harmful gambling, the thing is that you want to understand your customer's financial situation. So previously, this would mean that you would need to exchange perhaps paper bank statements. This would be slow and cumbersome. But with open banking, you're able to kind of quickly and easily access this data. They can share it in a way with a good user experience. And then when you have this data, which is up to date, gives you a really good full picture of the customer's financial health, you're able to go through and understand it, understand their income, understand what they're spending, understand how much they're spending on gambling, and then take this holistic picture and make a decision. And you're able to intervene if they are, for example, spending too large a proportion of their income on gambling, or if you identify any worry or worryful patterns. So really it's up to you, but it definitely opens up these possibilities to do this in a quick and easy way.
Very cool. Thank you very much. So we had a bunch of questions we didn't have time to answer. We're going to send the answers and the questions, makes it simpler, afterwards. So with that, I want to really thank Christian, Mikael, and of course Wool for spending your time. I at least learned a couple of new things today. That was really helpful. Thank you. After this session, we'll send a copy of the YouGov report on player payments that we spoke of before. We'll send some information on PayDirect. We'll send the Q&A. And with that, I'll hand back to Daniel at IGB. Thank you.
Yep, as Max said, that's all we have time for. So thanks very much again to Max, Wool, Christian, and Mikael for joining us, and for everyone else here for listening. Today's webinar, like all of our webinars, has been recorded and will be available to listen to on demand shortly on igamingbusiness.com if you want to rewatch or share with any of your colleagues. Otherwise, we'll see you all very soon.